Okay, let's say I have a section of code that I want to repeat a bunch of times, and it's the same couple of lines, and it's going to make the code just longer than I want it to do. I can make this simpler. If I scroll all the way down here to My Blocks, I can basically make a block that does a certain set of things and shorten my code. So I'm going to call this move around and save. So I've just defined move around. Instead of putting this section of code here a bunch of times, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to define move around as this series of movements right there. And then now in the My Blocks list, I have something I can call move around. I'm going to drag this to my list. So now every time my code comes across move around, it'll say, oh, I know how to do that. Go over here, do these things, and then jump back to the code. So as soon as it gets to the bottom of this list, it jumps right back to your code and does this. Cool, so that makes things a little easier. But there's also, let's say I want to do something a little more complicated. Let's make a new block and call it find the thing. But I'm going to add an input, but not a Boolean input. A Boolean input would mean true or false. I'm going to actually add a number or text input, and I'm going to call that distance. I'm going to save it. So now I have a definition for a find the thing called distance, and I have a little piece of code that says basically repeat until the sonar finds something in front of it, and then it's going to repeat this section in here, and if this button is pressed, stop. It's kind of a pause button. If it's not, cool, start moving. So it's going to start turning and looking for something in front of it within 5 centimeters, right? So I'm going to take my code, define it under find the thing. All right, so I do my whole move around procedure. I take my find the thing, I'm going to add that to my code, and I'm going to send it a number. I'm going to find it within 10 centimeters. And what that's going to do is basically, instead of defining it in here, I can drag this little distance and drop that in there. So basically, I'm going to find the thing within 10 centimeters. Or if I want to do something else again, I could find the thing within 5 centimeters. Or I could find the thing within 8 centimeters if I had different uses for the same chunk of code that I wanted to repeat, but I might want to repeat it for different distances or different speeds or different turning radii. As you make blocks, you can add multiple inputs to this. So you can send it a speed, a distance, a amount to turn. You can send it lots of information and basically do complicated things and clean up the code so it's a lot easier to read here, that the main body of the code reads doing simple things, and each of these is referring to something that you define over here. For those familiar with coding, this is basically defining new functions is what you're doing, and your main function starts calling functions that you define over here. So it's a way to clean up your code. It's a way to repeat sections of code that you might find useful to repeat. Have fun.